Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Where fame once shined, and shadows still whisper. Where fame meets fate. Welcome to Back of the Day. Subscribe for more hidden stories.
At 78, Sally Field stands as one of Hollywood's most beloved icons. In California, she was just a child when her parents' marriage began to crumble. Her father, an Army officer, drifted away from home, leaving young Sally to be raised mostly by her mother, Margaret Field, a beautiful actress herself. Her mother's world was one of scripts, studios, and long hours. To the little girl watching from the shadows, it was a world both dazzling and cold. When her mother remarried, Sally's childhood changed forever. Her new stepfather, Jock Mahoney, was a famous stuntman, charming to the world, but distant and controlling at home. Years later, Sally would confess that the man who seemed so heroic on screen made her feel small and frightened behind closed doors. In her memoir, she revealed the deep trauma of those years, the emotional manipulation, the silence, and the fear she carried into adulthood. It was a pain she buried for decades, hidden behind. The applause was loud, but the loneliness was louder. Her marriage had already ended. Fame had taken its toll. She was a single mother now, balancing the impossible, raising 2 children while surviving the scrutiny of an industry that often discarded women once they aged past 30. Then, she met Burt Reynolds. Their relationship would become one of the most talked about love stories in Hollywood, passionate, messy, and ultimately heartbreaking. Sally and Burt were opposites in so many ways, yet they were drawn to each other with a magnetic force. Burt was charming, confident, larger than life. Sally was emotional, grounded, and searching for real love. He made her laugh again, made her feel desired. But behind the laughter were cracks that slowly widened. Burt struggled with his own demons, ego, control, and a fear of vulnerability. Sally, who had spent her whole life trying to be enough for others, once again found herself shrinking to fit someone else's needs. The love that had once felt intoxicating began to hurt. Years later, she would call the relationship a perfect example of what I should never have had. They broke up, reunited, and broke up again, each time leaving her more wounded. Burt would later call her the love of his life, but Sally could never forget how deeply that love had also scarred her. She once said that every time he called, she couldn't resist picking up, because somewhere deep down, she still hoped he'd finally love her right, but he never did. When Burt passed away in 2018, decades after their breakup, Sally was left with a strange mix of grief and closure. She mourned him, but she also mourned the version of herself who had once believed love could fix a lifetime of hurt. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Sally Field was one of Hollywood's most respected actresses, with 2 Oscars, several Golden Globes, and a reputation for depth and sincerity that few could match. Yet, as her career soared, her personal life remained turbulent. She remarried briefly, but the relationship ended in pain once again. She poured herself into her children, her work, and the quiet corners of her life where no cameras could follow. As the years passed, Sally became more selective about her roles, choosing characters who mirrored her own inner struggles. Whether it was the tough mother in Steel Magnolias, or the determined widow in Places in the Heart, every performance felt like a piece of her own heart being shared with the world. Audiences felt her authenticity because it came from real pain. Behind the awards and the acclaim, there was still the lonely woman sitting quietly at home, wondering why love never seemed to stay, why happiness always felt temporary. Silence can feel deafening. Sally began to face the one thing she had always kept at a distance: herself. Aging in Hollywood is a cruel paradox. The same face that once graced magazine covers now becomes a reminder of time's unrelenting march. For women especially, the industry can be merciless. Youth is celebrated, wrinkles are criticized. But Sally Field, the woman who had survived everything, from personal trauma to public scrutiny, refused to disappear quietly. In her 60s, she began speaking out about sexism, ageism, and the deep pain of being discarded by an industry that she had given her life to. She said once was survival. She had survived abuse, rejection, heartbreak, and the brutal gaze of a world that demands perfection from women while giving them none in return. She had loved deeply, lost painfully, and still chosen to rise again and again. There is a kind of tragedy in that, not the kind that ends lives, but the kind that shapes them. The quiet tragedy of enduring, of keeping your head up when your heart is heavy, of walking through decades of noise and never truly being heard. Today, when Sally speaks, her voice carries the weight of wisdom and the softness of sorrow. She talks about forgiveness, not just of others, but of herself. She has made peace with the girl she once was, the woman she became, and the legend the world now sees. But behind every smile, every gracious thank you, lies a lifetime of invisible bruises. The loss of love, the sting of aging in a world obsessed with youth, the ache of nights spent alone after the spotlight fades. She once said, in an interview, "You think if you achieve enough, you'll finally feel whole." But the truth is, wholeness doesn't come from applause. It comes from acceptance. That sentence alone could define her entire journey. Even now, as fans still celebrate her legacy, few truly understand how much she endured just to stand tall. Because behind the iconic performances, the awards, and the laughter, Sally Field's greatest role was simply surviving herself. Her story is a mirror of human fragility, of a woman who wanted nothing more than to be loved for who she really was, not who the world wanted her to be. And that yearning, that endless search for love and peace, is what makes her tragedy so profoundly heartbreaking. But it is also what makes her so beautiful, because even in her pain, she taught the world what resilience looks like. Even in heartbreak, she showed that gentleness is not weakness, it is courage. And even in her loneliness, she gave hope to millions who saw themselves in her tears. At 78, Sally Field remains a quiet force, no longer chasing the light, but standing gracefully within her own. She may not believe she has conquered her pain, but in truth, she has done something even greater. She has transformed it. Every line on her face tells a story of survival. Every tremor in her voice carries decades of truth. And every time she smiles, it is a victory over everything that tried to break her. To this day, fans still write to her, thanking her for the comfort she gave them through her performances,